Here we go. Hi, Jules. It's great to have you on the show.
Thank you very much for inviting me, Melita.
Now, I'm really excited to have you here with us today because I know these fears and a lack of confidence or a perceived lack of self-belief is something that holds back a lot of women in business, and it's a recurring theme. And I really want to ask you some questions about that. But before we jump into that, I'd love to ask you, how did you get your business started, and how did you overcome those initial fears and doubts that we all have, and the can I really do this moments?
Well, I don't think I'm normal in that sense, because I actually don't think that I started my business. I think my business started me, because I had no intention of starting a business. So I'd come out of, I used to work in theatre as a stage manager, and I did that for 10 years, and I knew I needed to get out for varying reasons, got out, ended up getting some coaching myself, was encouraged to learn to coach. But even through that process was still not, never had the ambition of becoming and running a coaching practice. But as you know, when you're training as a coach, you need case studies, and my case studies started referring me to other people. And then I being asked to, would you come and do this workshop, or can you come and teach some of this here? And it was a little bit like, okay, I get to charge for this, right? Okay. So I kind of think that it started me. It wasn't a planned thing that I set out to do. So yeah, it's been a big learning curve, shall we say, and for me in various senses, because I didn't have that, I'm going to start a business. So I don't think I'm normal in that sense.
That's great that the market guided you and said, hey, we can see that you're really valuable in this area and we want to know more about that. And then it's a wonderful way to start a business when the clients are kind of waving at you already. So having not seen yourself as an entrepreneur and not sort of starting with this clear vision or anything like that, how has your business evolved? How have you built that into the successful business? Because you've been in business more than a decade now.
I have. It'd be 15 years in October this year, which is a little bit like, how on earth did that happen? But here it is 15 years later. I can actually remember going to a networking event and introducing myself, and someone saying, oh, how long have you been in business? And I was like, I've just registered. So that seems like 5 minutes ago. To be here is quite bizarre. So remind me of your question again, Melita, because I've just gone a complete blank.
So I was asking how you managed to build a business from this guidance that the clients were giving. So you didn't start off with a clear vision of this is what I'm going to create. So yeah. How did it evolve, and how did you build it from that foundation?
So I think it's something that I would advise people not to do in a certain degree, because as you say, the market to a certain degree was there, because I didn't have a clue really. So when somebody said, could you, I just went, yes. And in some senses it was good, because it was a baptism of fire. But equally that meant I said yes to a lot of things that weren't my skill set, that didn't light me up, that wasn't the best place for me and my skills. So I think at the beginning, because I didn't have that, I was saying yes to a lot of things. But that, again, because of it being a baptism of fire, it did lead me to understand more of what is my skill set, where do I sit? And then over the years, just honing that down more and more and more to get clear on, these are the things that I want to be doing. This is where I seem to be making a difference. Which is a very cliched phrase, but it's very true for me, that I get extremely passionate and sometimes irate at people's lack of desire to make a difference for themselves, to then make a difference for their family. So when somebody, whether that's in a conference or whether it's one-on-one, when someone kind of like, you can see them leaning in a little bit, it's like, right, I get that excites me, because I'm like, okay, if I can just make a difference to that one person, the ripple effect can be huge. So yeah, I said yes to far too many things, and I wouldn't advise that. I would say that takes you out of integrity, and it spreads you far too thin. But it's a scary thing to do, because if you start saying no, then where's the money going to come from? And I have to say yes. You ask most people, it doesn't matter what industry they work in, what do you do? And they will talk in a very blanket way that everybody needs their service. And it's like, okay, well then it just doesn't work that way. It's just not helpful to the other person, really.
Yeah, but I think that's quite encouraging in your story, that you you did spread yourself a bit thin, but through that process you learned where you can have the most impact, and you learned where your passion is. So sometimes I think when people start a business, that vision isn't always clear, and they get this kind of like, well, I want to do something, I'm not quite sure what that is. And I think that's okay, just to get started, and you can learn through that process too. I think there's no one perfect way to start a business, and sometimes
No, and I
it's
think that's kind of like again, I get a little bit kind of twitchy and annoyed when people go, this is the 3 steps or the 5 steps or this is the way, da da da, because it's like, well, that's the way that you did it and it worked for you, but that may not be the right way for me or Bob or Sarah or Charlie or whatever. And I think that we can take that information and it's like trying on somebody else's jacket and going, oh, I quite like this, I would never have picked this before, but then another one you might put on and go, oh gosh, no, this is not for me at all. And I think sometimes we do have to try things on, especially if we're not sure where we're going.
Yeah, exactly. Now, you talked about saying yes to lots of different things, and that takes courage. So when you're like, oh, I don't know if I can do that, but hey, yeah, I'll do that. Where do you get your courage from to do that?
I think some of it is naivety. I don't sometimes I'm a little bit like, or the behaviors that I can do is I can jump into the pool at the deep end and go, oh, what, I need to swim, right? Okay. And again, that has its strengths and weaknesses and pros and cons, whichever way you want to look to it. So I think one of it is not, bit of it is naivety. I think a bit of it is stubbornness as well. If somebody says you can't, I kind of want to stick 2 fingers up and go, right, well, I'll show you. So some of it can be a bit belligerent stubbornness as well. And then I think that there's another part of it, which is around some of it is about getting out of my own way. So it's interesting, as you asked me that question, there's an image that popped into my head that I haven't thought about for years. So I find it fascinating that that's popped up. And I can't even remember, I don't think I'd been in business maybe a year and a half, 2 years roughly. And I went and did a workshop for 90 teenage boys.
Wow.
Yeah. And it was being held in a pub in a room above. It was very bizarre, very, very bizarre. And they were all in, it wasn't even like a theatre setting, they were all in a big circle and I was in the middle. And, I'm not the tallest of people in the world. And these are teenage boys. They were sort of, I think they were, if I remember correctly, they were 16, 17, 18. So, most of them, I'm having a conversation with them up here. And to stand, if you'd have said to me, 2-3 years before that I'd have done that, I'd have gone, no. But I think what happened was I took me out of the equation. And I was like, if there's one thing that I can say that triggers something for somebody else, that helps make their life easier, better, whatever terminology is correct, then I need to get out of the way. And it's okay for me to go into those situations. It's okay for me to go into those situations and be nervous. It's okay for me to go into those situations and be uncomfortable. I don't have to always be, rocking it out on the inside. And it's not about faking it. I don't mean that, but it's honoring what's happening there. So it's okay for me to be nervous and still get this message across.
Yeah, I love that. I love that you make your almost your message bigger than you. And yeah, if I can just do one, if I can impact someone in one small way, then it's worth making this effort. And you always grow in that process as well, which is the beauty of becoming an entrepreneur and taking your future into your own hands, is that you do discover so much about yourself and that you're so much more capable than you ever realized, which is really magic.
Yeah, and one of my friends said to me quite a long time ago, actually, he was an entrepreneur at the time, and we were just talking about, and he's big into personal development, and we were just talking about the various things about running your own business. And he just laughed and he said, well, what most people don't realize is that running your own business is the most expensive and difficult personal development course you will ever put yourself on. And that's always stuck with me. And I think he's absolutely true. I do think it's right, because in those moments when you are, and you may have a skill set in, I don't know, let's say marketing, for example, and that's your skill set, and that may not be the business that you're running, but that may be a skill set, so that lights you up. But then it comes to the flip side of having to sort out the accounts, or dealing with HR, or you know, looking out for staff, and it's just like, oh, I don't want to do that, and we do everything we possibly can to push away from it. And that's why I think it's one of these courses, it can be an expensive course, that thrusts you into those positions of seeing all of those different things, and you know, drop the expectation that you're going to be good at, or know how to do every single one of those things, or love every single one of those things.
Yeah.
You know, I messaged my accountant yesterday. I mean, I'm not a details person, and it sends me into a little bit of a spiral, not in a because I can't do it way, just because it's just like, oh, I just don't enjoy it. It doesn't light me up at all.
Yeah.
And I sent a message to him yesterday, and I was like, right, okay, we need to talk about this. When can we get on a call? And he's like, oh my gosh, what happened to you? And I'm like, I'm facing this head on. I'm done with, you know, avoiding it. Let's do it. And he was like, brilliant. So, and I think also, you know, when people look at someone who's been in business for 5, 10, 15, 20, 25 years, they assume that they've got it all sorted and they know how to do it. Well, I don't mean this in a horrible way, but this current situation is showing that not everybody is as sorted or as stable in their business, whatever their business, big or small, as it may have looked from the outside.
Yeah.
And I think that's important for us to recognize. You know, I do follow the adage of, you know, don't compare yourself to don't compare your inside self to someone else's outside, because those two are not the same thing. It's, you know, it's apples and pears. Just don't do it.
And I think we have a tendency to imagine that we are less able than we are, and everyone else is more able, and we don't compare, as you say, we don't compare fairly, and it's always on ourselves. I think I was quite fortunate that from the age of 15, I've worked in small businesses up until I think I first moved into large corporate when I was 28.
Oh wow.
And and it was a real shock to me that people were so unaware of what it takes to run a business, because I'd only ever worked in this small department doing one thing with, you know, it was quite a limited view they had of what it takes to run a business. So I think a lot of these people then go and run a business, and it is a big shock as to how different the two worlds can be. But then it's exciting as well. If you're up for the challenge and you've got that growth mindset, then that's the real, you can grow so quickly.
Yeah, definitely.
Now, I can't have you on the show being a confidence coach and not tap you for some great tips on how to build confidence, because what I see is it takes a certain amount of confidence just to get out there and start your business in the first place. And we all have these demons and fears and doubts in the back of our mind, but we kind of learn that we can do it anyway. We could feel that fear and just get out there. But then each time you have a new opportunity, you go to scale up, you go into that next level client, all these fears can come flooding back. Have you got any tips or tools or of advice to help people manage their confidence and keep moving through these different stages?
Yeah, so first thing I would say there is, if it's a fear that disappears and then comes back, then that means the fear's actually not been dealt with. So for me, first and foremost, that would be like, that's what needs to be addressed. Because when you can remove that, it's like people talk about, oh, they pushed my button, or they triggered me. It's like, well, if you don't have the button and you don't have the trigger, then it doesn't matter what they say or do. It's not going to happen. So that would be my first thing with that. But then the second thing with it, there's an exercise that I like to do with all sorts of people in different ways, is looking at the difference between competence and confidence. So very often people have the two married up as being one thing, and they're not. They're two very separate things. So whether you're starting out in business, or whether you are taking it up to the next level, or you're maybe you're diversifying, or you're expanding, whatever it may be, is first and foremost kind of put the confidence question to one side, really, and actually look at the competency side. So I usually do this as two columns, and I have competence on one side and confidence on the other, and go through, okay, well, I may be doing this new thing. So what competencies do I already have? And take the time to list all of those things out, because you'll get very clear on what you do have.
Mm.
And then underneath that is then look for, okay, well, what are the gaps? What do I, do I need a course? Do I need a coach? Do I need a mentor? Do I need to go and just have a sounding board with somebody about this? What do I need in order to develop that? The challenge that most women have is that's where they get caught, and they stay in that spiral of, I need to do that course, and I can't do that until I've got that qualification, or I need to make sure that I've got that before. And that's the perfection loop. Was a completely different conversation. Well, not a different conversation, but that needs to be looked at, because that's just not helpful.
Yeah.
But I would say no more than 5 things in that competency column that need to be worked on, and just do them. Go and do it. So read that book, get that coach, whatever it may be, just do it. And that's a separate column, a completely separate column to the confidence side. So the way that I look at it is competence is very external. So it's about those skills, experiences, abilities, knowledge. It's an external thing that you can see. Whereas confidence is an internal thing. And that's about how you're thinking about you. What do you think about you? How are you thinking about you in relation to that client, that proposal, employing people, whatever it may be? How are you describing you in relation to that situation? And when you can get clear on what's going on there, that's when you can start to see what needs to be worked on there. Because if you're describing yourself, so one of my things, because I'd never worked in business. I worked in show business. I worked with glitzy hands and egos. So going into this world, and one of the things that I quite often would say to my friends who had been in the corporate world like yourself, is I'd be like, well, I was sort of like looking for the magic answer. Well, how does that big machine and monster work? How can I get in there and start doing some work? And 2 of my friends, one who still works in corporate and the other one doesn't, but they are both of them were very senior. One left. And I said to them, I just need to find out what's going on, because I know I don't have the language. I know I don't understand all the structures and the departments and all of this. And both of them said exactly the same thing. And I've heard this so many times from people directed at me. Don't learn it. Because actually what you bring is so refreshing and so different that actually that's far more helpful. So my competency side, I kind of had the skill. I knew I had the skills, but my confidence in relation to that was in relation to how I was thinking about myself in relation to working in corporate was, well, I can't do that because I've never done it.
Yeah.
So that's when I address that and go, okay, well, is that true? I've got a couple of other tools that I use around that, but is that true? Is that, do I need to work on it? If so, what do I need to do? And start challenging that thinking, because ultimately it's just a thought. It's not a fact.
Yeah.
It's a thought. So the more I can look at that, then that's when I can start breaking those things down. That being said, I would always encourage people to start with the competency side first, because that's where the tangible stuff sits.
Yeah.
And when you've got that tangible stuff, for a great deal of people, that helps them just go, okay, I've got the evidence now. And unfortunately, we do work on an evidence-based way of thinking a lot of the time. So if you can grab that evidence, then that will give you a good foundation to then start moving from.
What an amazing tool. Thank you so much. Because I think, when we have these fears and doubts, we just leave them in our mind where they run riot. Once you get it down on paper and start breaking it down and seeing what as I say, it doesn't stay as a thought, it becomes factual, and you can see what the real situation is and where you can take action, where you need to fill the gaps, what you can just make up for as you go along. It makes a whole difference. So thank you so much for sharing that tool.
One of the other things as well, if anybody wants to connect with me on LinkedIn, I know it's going to go up today. I don't know when our broadcast is going to go out, our podcast rather, but people will be able to find it on my LinkedIn. But I also talk about fear in there and how to address fear, because one of the things I'm noticing in this climate with the clients I'm working with, both individuals and in organizations, is I'm doing a lot of webinars for people and videos for people around fear and uncertainty. So in the article, I've given another tool within there that can help people actually start to face those fears.
Oh, wonderful. I'll add a link to that into the show notes below so everyone can find that easily, because it sounds really, really helpful. So I'd like to just wrap up by asking, Do you have any final pieces of advice to help the women out there who are growing a business?
So I think what I would do is I would echo the two of the things I've already mentioned, which is about, have integrity. And I know that's hard at the beginning, in the context of, especially if you're needing to get the clients and the work in, because that's going to pay the bills. So I get sometimes we can end up saying yes to stuff that isn't quite what we would want to be doing. And if you need to do that to pay the bill, then absolutely fair enough, because that's out of integrity of looking after yourself and your family. Yeah. But I think the more you can understand what's the values that you're working from, then that gives you a guidepost to be able to say yes or no to things, to go, do you know what, that's not for me. And I think that also helps me be even more comfortable going, do you know, that's not for me, but it is for so-and-so. Yeah. And I'm far more happy then it's joyous to then pass things across, because I'm like, that's not for me, but I know that that's for Melita, or I know that's for, Janine or whatever. It's brilliant. I love that.
Yeah, it can really shortcut your decision-making process.
Yeah, and totally.
As well.
Yeah, absolutely. The next thing is what I've spoken about, kind of in relation to the competence and confidence exercise. It's not easy to say. Is when you've got that competence column information there, that can build trust within yourself. Mm-hmm. And you and I both know that trust links directly to confidence. It's the root derivation of the word. Confidere means with trust. So, but then the next part I think that is so important for us to work on is faith. Yeah. And what I mean by that is have faith that you will always find a way. Have faith that that life provides. It's one of my mottos that again, I wrote about this recently on my blog, that life provides. It really does. It may not provide you with what you want, but it always provides you what you need. Yes. Be that in business or elsewhere. And then the final thing that I would say is really important is especially for solopreneurs, and especially for people who are doing something like we are from a service perspective, that we all too often marry ourselves and the business together. Yes. So we are one, and we're not. This is something I do, and I love it. This is something I do, but it's not who I am. And I think that that's important as well. I was talking with a client yesterday about this. She's just been furloughed from her work, and part of what was coming up for her was around that, but I am my work, what do I do? And I'm like, well, no, you're not. It's something that you do. Now you just need to do something else, whatever that may be. And so to me, especially those of us who are working for ourselves, because we can get so caught up in, well, I must, when in fact, actually, we need to separate those things out. And by doing that then provides you the focus of going, this is where the business needs attention, and then this is where I need attention. Because if you're not taking care of yourself, physically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually, whatever way you want to look at it, if you're not taking care of yourself, you've got nothing to give to that business at all. And therefore you've got nothing to give to your clients.
Yeah, I fell into that trap in my first business, and it really led me down the path towards burnout. Because I was putting everything into my clients and everything into my family and nothing into me. And then, it got to the point I literally had nothing left to give. And it didn't feel good for anyone. I wasn't delivering for my clients. And it was not a nice place to be. So that's great advice.
And I think that whether people are employed or self-employed, actually, that's unfortunately that's a loop that we get caught in. So separate those two things out. I had tons of work to do. I think it was last week at some point, but it was about 2:00 in the afternoon, and I was like, you know what? All my body needs to do is rest. I'm so tired, I just need to rest. So I went and made friends with my sofa for the rest of the afternoon. And yes, I can hear that voice going, but you need to get that done and that done. I'm like, do they need to be done right now? Well, no. Okay, then. This is what's important right now. And that meant then when I did go back to doing that work, I've got more energy. I've got more to give because I've replenished myself. So I think that they would be the three things. Go from a place of integrity, work on trust and faith, and separate yourself out from the business so that you can give yourself the attention that you need, as well as giving the business the attention that it needs.
Yeah, that wellness and well business, they really go hand in hand, don't they?
Definitely.
Jules, thank you so much. You have shared so many golden nuggets and used really helpful tools. It's been very generous of you. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for inviting me. It's a pleasure.
Where can people find you if they want to get in touch?
So the best place is to go direct to my website, which is juleswyman.com. And then you can find all the social media links from there. Like everybody, I'm all over the place with that. So you can connect with me, stalk me any way you like. And there's free stuff on there as well. So if anybody wants to connect with me, and if they want to connect with me direct, then it's jules@juleswyman.com.
Fantastic. And I'll pop those links below as well to make it easy for people to begin contact. Wonderful. Thank you so much again for all your valuable advice and your time this morning.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Bye, Jules.